Hello, I'm Rabbi David Abramson, one of the chaplains at the Hebrew Home. Some of you remember me from the Wasserman building, where for many years I led weekday minyanim a number of times each week. Some of you may remember me from Landau House, where I led high holiday services for a number of years, and also Kabbalat Shabbat services on Friday afternoons. God willing, the day will come sometime soon when we'll be able to be with each other in person again. But in the meantime, it's good to be with you for a pre-recorded Kabbalat Shabbat service. Bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam. Bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom. The Kabbalat Shabbat service consists mostly of a collection of psalms, which are tacked on to the beginning of the evening service, the Ma'ariv service. These psalms, as well as Lecha Dodi, which we will also chant in a few minutes, enhances our celebration of Shabbat. The first psalm in Kabbalat Shabbat is Psalm 95, which says to us, "Let us sing to Adonai, let us rejoice in our Creator. Let us greet God with thanksgiving, singing psalms of praise." Praising God, thanking God, a central theme of our religious lives generally, hopefully, but certainly even more so, a central theme of Shabbat. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena ladonai, lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena ladonai. Naria, naria, letzor yish enu, nikadma fana bitoda. Naria, naria, letzor yish enu, bizmirot naria lo. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena ladonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena ladonai. Another psalm of Kabbalat Shabbat is Psalm 29, which celebrates God's power and God's majesty. You might recognize this psalm from the Shabbat morning service because traditionally we chant it as we are returning the Torah to the Ark, but it is also found on Friday nights in our Kabbalat Shabbat service, and we chant it to a unique Kabbalat Shabbat tune. Mizmor leDavid, havu ladonai b'nei elim, havu ladonai kavod va'oz, havu ladonai kivod shemo, ishtachavu ladonai behadrat kodesh. Kol Adonai al hamayim, el hakavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim. Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shover arazim, Vaishaber Adonai et arzei halavanon, Vayarkidem kimo egel Levanon v'siryon kimo ven re'emim. Kol Adonai chotzev lavotesh, Kol Adonai yachil midbar, yachil Adonai midbar kadesh. Kol Adonai yecholel ayalot, Vayechesov Ye'arod, Uvheichalo Kulo Omer Kavod, Kulo Omer, Kulo Omer Kavod. Adonai lama buyashav, vayeshev Adonai melech leolam, Adonai oz le'amo yitain, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. We now continue with Lecha Dodi, a beautiful hymn to Shabbat, which was written in the 16th century by Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz, a member of the mystical Kabbalistic Jewish community of Tzfat. Liturgy, and especially liturgical melody, have the power to transport us, to take us to other times and to other places sometimes. So sometimes when I sing Lecha Dodi, I am transported in my imagination to 16th century Tzfat, to that Kabbalistic community that nurtured the spiritual wisdom and spiritual sensitivity that led Rabbi Alkabetz to compose this beautiful hymn. But the particular melody to Lecha Dodi, which will be familiar to many of you, I first learned about 45 years ago as a student at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And so this melody sometimes takes me back to my own seminary years, to that community, to that time, and to that place. As we sing Lecha Dodi, let's let the words and the melodies take us wherever they will take us. Lecha Dodi likrat kahala, Penei Shabbat nekabela, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Hishmianu el hamiyuchad Adonai echad, U'shemo echad l'shem ultiferet v'lithilah. Lecha Dodi likrat kahala, Penei Shabbat nekabela, Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelecha, Ki mikor ha'beracha merosh mikedem, Nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila. Lecha Dodi likrat kahala, Penei Shabbat nekabela, Mikdash melech ihir melucha, Kumitzei mitoch hafecha harav lach shevet, V'yehi mekabacha v'hu yachamol alayichem la. Lecha Dodi likrat kahala, Penei Shabbat nekabela, Hitna ari meyafarku mi livshi, Bigdei tifartecha mi al yad, Ben Yishai beit halachmi, Korva el nafshi gehala. Lecha Dodi likrat kahala, Penei Shabbat nekabela, Boi v'shalom ateret bala, Gam b'simcha uv'tzohola, Toch emunei am segula, Boi chala, Boi chala. Lecha Dodi likrat kahala, Penei Shabbat nekabela. Let's continue now with Psalm 92, the Shabbat song in English. A song for Shabbat. It is good to acclaim Adonai, to sing your praise, exalted God, to affirm your love each morning and your faithfulness each night, to the music of the lute and the melody of the harp. Your works, Adonai, make me glad. I sing with joy of your creation. How vast your works, Adonai! Your designs are beyond our grasp. The thoughtless cannot comprehend. The foolish cannot fathom this. The wicked may flourish, springing up like grass, but their doom is sealed, for you are supreme forever. Your enemies, Adonai, your enemies shall perish. All the wicked shall crumble. But me you have greatly exalted. I am anointed with fragrant oil. I have seen the downfall of my foes. I have heard the despair of my attackers. The righteous shall flourish like the palm tree. They shall grow tall like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of Adonai, they will thrive in the courts of our God. They shall bear fruit even in old age. They shall be ever fresh and fragrant, to proclaim Adonai is just, my rock, in whom there is no flaw. Let's chant the end of the Shabbat Psalm. Tzadik katamar yifrach, ke'erez balavanon yiske, shetulim behevet Adonai, bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu. Od yenuvun beseva, deshenim vera'ananim yihyu lehagid, ki yashar Adonai tzuri, velo avlatabo. We now continue with the main body of the Ma'ariv service, of the evening service for Shabbat. The first bracha of the Ma'ariv service reminds us of the miracle of creation. Not only the miracle of the original creation so long ago, but the notion that God renews every day with every sunrise, with every sunset, with the usual rhythms of nature. God recreates the miracle of the creation of the world. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, who rules the universe, your word bringing the evening dusk. You open with wisdom the gates of dawn, design the day with wondrous skill, set out the succession of seasons, and arrange the stars in the sky according to your will. Adonai Tzvaot, you create day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness away from light. Eternal God, your sovereignty shall forever embrace us. Praised are you, Adonai, for each evening's dusk. Uma'avir yom u'mevi laila, umavdil ben yom u'ben laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo, el chai v'kayam, tamim ochaleinu leolam va'ed, baruch ata Adonai, ha'ma'ariv aravim. The second bracha of the evening service, the bracha of ahava, of love, reminds us of God's love for us and the great gift of love that God gave to us, namely the Torah. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael, amacha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadta. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu, b'shochveinu uvkumeinu, nasiach b'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, uv'mitzvotecha, le'olam va'ed, ki hem chayenu v'orech yameinu, v'orech yameinu, uvahem nege yomam v'layla, yomam v'layla, v'avatecha al taseh mimenu le'olamim, baruch ata Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. We now continue with the Shema and the first paragraph of the Shema, the fundamental statement of monotheism, of recognition of the one true God, and a reminder of our obligation to respond to God's love for us with our own love for God. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha uv'chol nafshecha uv'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha vishinantam levanecha v'dibarta b'ham b'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shochtecha uv'kumecha ukshartam la'od al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvish arecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvish arecha. The bracha following the Shema is known as Geula, redemption, and it brings to mind the paradigm of God's redemption, redeeming us from slavery in Egypt. And this bracha concludes with Micha Mocha, the words with which the Israelites thankfully praised God upon their liberation from bondage. Umalchuto baratzon kibelu aleihem, Moshe v'nei Yisrael lecha'anu shira, v'simcha rabba v'yamaruhu chulam, mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar ba'kodesh, Norati lo tosef eleh. Malchutecha ra'u vanecha, bokeyam lifnei Moshe, ze'eli anu ve'amru, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, v'ne'emar, ki fada Adonai et Yaakov, ug'alo miyad chazak mimenu, baruch ata Adonai, gal Yisrael. We continue now with Hashkivenu. Help us, Adonai, to lie down in peace and awaken us again, our sovereign, to life. Spread over us your shelter of peace. Guide us with your good counsel. Save us because of your mercy. Shield us from enemies and pestilence, from starvation, sword, and sorrow. Remove the evil forces that surround us. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, O God, who watches over us and delivers us, our gracious and merciful ruler. Guard our coming and our going. Grant us life and peace now and always. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Praised are you, Adonai, who spreads the shelter of peace over us, over all his people Israel, and over Jerusalem. Ushmor tzeitenu uvoenu l'chaim ulshalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha, baruch ata Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. We continue now with V'shamaru, that passage from Exodus chapter 31, that reminds us that God rested on the seventh day and was refreshed. This is an allusion to the creation story, the beginning of the book of Genesis, in which God spends 6 days creating the heaven and the earth, creating everything in the universe, and then sanctifies the seventh day by ceasing work, by resting on the seventh day. It makes us wonder, did God really need to rest? Does God have a body that gets tired? Does God need the physical rest that we need on Shabbat? Not necessarily. I think God rested on the seventh day because God knew that one day God was going to command us to rest on the seventh day. Perhaps God didn't need that rest, but God knew that we need it. We need Shabbat for physical rest, for psychological rest, for spiritual rejuvenation. And so God rested on Shabbat, not because God needed it, but because we need it. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam, oti leolam, oti leolam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i shavat vayinafash, shavat vayinafash, shavat vayinafash. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. We now come to the Amidah, also called in English the silent devotion, a period of silent personal prayer. And so we'll pause in our service now for a few moments of personal prayer. I'll display on the screen the first brachot of the Amidah in English, so that if you would like, you can read that passage or simply spend this time in personal meditation and prayer. Ose shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru, amen. We now continue with Vayechulu Hashamayim, that passage from Genesis chapter 2 that describes the first Shabbat. The heavens and the earth and all they contain were completed. On the seventh day, God finished the work God had been doing and ceased on the seventh day from all the work that God had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and called it holy, because on it God ceased from all the work of creation. Vayechulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzivam, vayechal Elohim bayom hashevi melachto asher asa, vayishpot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa. Vayavarech Elohim et Yom HaShevi, Vayikadesh oto, Ki vo shavat mikol melachto, Ki vo shavat mikol melachto, Asher bara Elohim, Asher bara Elohim la'asod. Let's continue now with Debbie Friedman's prayer for healing, which for many years has been a feature in many synagogue services. The traditional Misha Berach Lecholim, the traditional prayer for healing, as well as Debbie Friedman's well-known adaptation of this prayer, give us the opportunity to express our concern for loved ones who are in need of healing and express our hope that God will send healing. I often like to say this is our opportunity to pray for friends, relatives, other people in our lives, and sometimes also to pray for ourselves, because of course there are moments in all of our lives when we are in need of healing. During this past year, of course, when we pray for healing, our thoughts and our prayers are directed to those who have and will struggle with COVID-19. We pray for their healing as well. Misheberach Avotenu Mikor Habaracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mikor habaracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. The Torah portion for this week is Parashat Yitro, which contains the story of the revelation at Mount Sinai, the giving of the commandments, specifically the giving of the 10 commandments, the first 10 mitzvot at Mount Sinai. Exodus chapter 19 describes the events leading up to the revelation, and then chapter 20 presents the 10 commandments themselves. The Torah's account is dramatic enough, but midrashic literature, that vast literature of rabbinic legends, adds so many other details and interpretations and levels of meaning to the biblical narrative that a short sermon on Parashat Yitro could very easily turn into a very long sermon on Parashat Yitro. I'm going to try to avoid that and share with you just one midrash, one legend about the giving of the commandments. In a sense, this legend finds itself between the end of chapter 19, the events leading up to the revelation, and chapter 20, the revelation itself. In other words, it describes the moment before God spoke. Rabbi Abahu said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, when God gave the Torah, no bird twittered, no fowl flew, no ox lowed, none of the Ophanim, those are the flying angels in heaven, none of the Ophanim stirred a wing. The seraphim did not say, holy, holy. The seraphim are the angels described by the prophet Isaiah, saying, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Melochol Haaretz Kevodo. Holy, holy, holy is Adonai Tzevaot. The whole world is filled with God's glory. Those are the words with which the angels praised God in Isaiah's description, and yet in this Midrash, the angels in heaven were also silenced. The Midrash goes on, the sea did not roar, the creatures did not speak. The whole world was hushed into breathless silence, and the voice went forth, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am Adonai, your God. I want to do a little experiment with you for a moment. I want to sit with you in total silence for just a few seconds. Now, what did you hear during those seconds? Maybe you heard the heating blowing hot air in the room. Maybe you heard some sounds of nature outside. Maybe you heard some sounds from your computer or the television on which you're watching this. When we sit in silence in the real world, there never is complete silence. And yet that's what the Midrash is trying to describe to us. A silence in which the usual sounds of nature are not there. A silence in which even the angels in heaven, usually praising God, are completely silent as well. This Midrash tries to capture the utter mysteriousness of the revelation at Mount Sinai, the utter mystery of the notion of God speaking to us. And yet that's exactly what Parshat Yitro is trying to do to us, to force us to focus on that very notion of God speaking to us. And that challenges us to be more and more open to hearing God speak to us, not from a mountain in the Sinai desert, but speak to us through Torah, through our sacred literature, and through all of Judaism. Our challenge is to hear the voice of God in our Jewish experience. That, I think, is the real challenge of Mount Sinai. We'll continue now with Kiddush, the sanctification of Shabbat, which we traditionally recite over a cup of wine or grape juice, a symbol of joy, a symbol of the joy of Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, b'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh, zecher litziat Mitzrayim, kivanu v'acharta, v'otanu kidashta, mikol hamim, v'shabbat kodshecha, v'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. And now, Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, la'tet gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kigoyeh ha'aratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'goralenu kechol hamonam, va'anachnu koreim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamelachim,
HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
And now mourners and those observing yahrzeit, recite with me the words of the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'alama divara kir'utei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam ul'alamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha berichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alama v'imru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. We now conclude our service with Shalom Aleichem. There's a midrash in the Talmud that tells us that every Friday night, 2 angels visit every Jewish home. They may be invisible, but they're there, at least in our imaginations. And they're there to check on us, to make sure that we're making Shabbos properly. And so the song Shalom Aleichem is the song with which we welcome the angels into our homes, and in the broader sense, the song with which we welcome Shabbat into our homes. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem leshalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malchei hamalachim, hakadosh baruch hu. Baruch hu ni leshalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malchei hamalachim hakadosh baruch hu. Tzeitechem leshalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malchei hamalachim hakadosh baruch hu. Well, this concludes our Shabbat service. As I said at the beginning, we look forward to that day, whenever it may come, when we're able to be with one another in shul, in person. But in the meantime, it's good to be with you, even in this virtual form. And so I wish you Shabbat Shalom, a peaceful, restful, and meaningful Shabbat.